Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. Certainly by this time of the rains retreat, one should have achieved some sense or some experience of peacefulness, stillness and concentration. If one hasn't, then one has to ask oneself why. What is the cause for these things? The Dhamma of the Lord Buddha is a Dhamma which talks about causes and effects. And whatever the effect is, we have to look for its cause. If it's a good effect, a wholesome, useful effect, which tends towards peacefulness and stillness of the mind, clarity, which leads one to renunciation, which leads one towards Nibbana, this is a wholesome state of mind. One has to know the causes for these states of mind arising, so one can encourage and develop those causes. If one has found that unwholesome states have developed, those which lead away from stillness of the mind, from calm, from concentration, if they lead away from renunciation and lead to the mind seeking to possess, to own things, to indulge in the world outside, if it's going away from Nibbana, you have to know the cause for that. Find out the reason why and do something about it. So far in the retreat, it's a long way to go yet until the end of the retreat. So if anything is lacking or deficient, find out the cause why and do something about it, in order that one's mind can achieve calm, can achieve a state of stillness, a mind which is settled, clear and powerful. Because the purpose of this retreat is to attain such states, and then to use those states to gain insight, to gain wisdom. And it's at this time of the retreat that one really wishes to emphasize the gaining of insight, the gaining of wisdom. And hopefully that one has used one's time wisely, and one has made the practice of calm states of mind paramount in one's day, and all the other lesser little things one has to worry about, or the other duties, one has made them less important. If one has done that, then one will find the mind is actually becoming peaceful, is actually achieving states of calm. I just recall in one of the suttas I was reading recently, they say that one type of monks, puts first those things which befall the mind, either defilements or duties. He makes that the most important thing in the day. And he throws down the burden of developing the mind in calmness. And that sort of monk does not achieve any results. That sort of monk does not incline towards Nibbana, towards release. And the other sort of monk puts forth solitude, is the word, paviveka, puts solitude, both physical solitude and mental solitude. The mental solitude of first jhana, puts that as being paramount, that as being first. in Pali, Pubangama, first, paramount, up front, makes that the most important. And he throws away the burden, throws down the duty of all the other little things which might arise, which might befall him during the day. It's really what we make important in our day, is what we'll develop. So one can ask oneself, what did I make important today? And if one has made the practice of calming the mind, settling the mind, making it peaceful and still in the form of concentration, then the mind will have a sense of clarity. The mind will have a sense of sharpness, so it can penetrate into things, rather than being dull and hardly penetrating at all into the nature of existence. And if the mind is clear, it is sharp, it's energetic, it's ripe, it's ready, it's workable, it's soft for the practice of insight, for the practice of understanding why we are caught and stuck in samsara, why we are caught in the ever-changing rise and fall of suffering and delight. To actually find out what the problem is. And in the way of practicing insight meditation, one has to start, if one is going to practice insight meditation successfully, one has to start with a mind which is free from the hindrances, from the 5 hindrances. If the mind is still obsessed by the 5 hindrances, it will not be seeing clearly enough to get that type of insight which gives rise to Magga and Phala, which gives rise to the path and fruit of Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami or Arahat. Sometimes that one can understand that even before entering a jhana, the mind can be free from the nivaranas, free from the hindrances. But that particular state, just without entering jhana, is very unstable. The hindrances can come in at any moment, as if they're just lurking just outside the door. They can come in and spoil the opportunity for wisdom at any time. And that's why there's such a moment when the mind has settled down but jhana has yet to arise. The hindrances are discarded, yes, but the mind is not stable enough. And the hindrances can come in so easily, it is an unlikely place where wisdom can arise. It is an unlikely place where the insight that gives Magga and Phala can occur. However, on the other side of jhana, when a person emerges from jhana, the hindrances are suppressed, and they remain suppressed, and they do not occur again for a long time after the emergence from a jhana. And this is that marvelous opportunity, that marvelous time, when the mind is clear, when it's bright, when it's soft, when it's workable, and it stays that way for a long time, where the mind maintains this power of being free from the hindrances for many minutes, sometimes for many hours, sometimes even for many days. And this is that time when the mind can really appreciate the teachings of the Buddha, realize them, penetrate them, and fully understand them, if one remembers to turn the mind in that direction. Otherwise, one can use the joy, the bliss after emerging from jhana, the sense of ease, the sense of power and comfort in other ways. But the best way of using the power gained from experience of jhana is to use that to gain that sort of insight which will free you from samsara, which will unlock some of the chains, some of the sangyojana, the fetters, which tie one to the unpleasant, full of suffering wheel of birth and death. And the way that one practices insight meditation at this time is basically to understand the three characteristics of impermanence, anicca, dukkha, suffering, and not self. In all things, especially when we say all things, in one's own body and mind, because this is where the problem is, in one's own body and mind. And so one looks at one's own body and mind from the standpoint of these three characteristics, anicca, dukkha and anatta. One looks at the five khandhas of rupa, the body, vedana, this first feeling which comes up, sanya, the perception which comes next, the sankhara, the whole mental world of formations, thought, will, mindfulness, moods, emotions, this whole world of mentality, and the process itself of consciousness. To be able to look at each one of these, or part of these, and to apply this investigating tool of anicca, dukkha, anatta. Is it anicca, or is it nicca? Is it permanent, or is it impermanent? Is it sukha, or is it dukkha? Is it happiness, or is it full of suffering? And is there a self there, an atta, or is there no self? Or one can use the six senses. Again, these are the realms of one's experience. And see here whether there's anicca, dukkha or anatta with the six senses. Or one can use the four foundations of mindfulness, the satipatthana, which is another way at looking at the five khandhas. The form, rupa, body, the kayanupassi, the contemplation of the body. And why are we contemplating the body? To see anicca, dukkha, anatta. To see whether it's permanent or impermanent, to see whether it's suffering or whether it's something which is delightful, to see whether there's a self in there or not. And part of the Satipatthana Sutta is where the meditator knows enough about the body to know just that there is a body and not a self. Notice how that phrase is explained in the commentaries. That he has enough mindfulness and comprehension to know there is a body, which means just body, nothing more, not a self, not a controller. Or he does the same with vedana, with the feeling which comes up. He knows it with enough mindfulness and clear comprehension to know it's just vedana and not a self. Or he knows it's just mind or consciousness and nothing else. Or he knows it's just the mind objects, the dhammas, and nothing else, not a self, not a being. And one can choose any of these, either the contemplating of the five aggregates, the five khandhas, or contemplating the six senses, or contemplating one of the four satipatthanas at this particular stage, in order to find out the truth of existence. In one of the suttas I was reading today, it was in the Vatupama Sutta, they make a lovely description of understanding the reality of things. This particular stage in this sutta, like many of the beautiful suttas of the Buddha, which start with the practice of morality, with ethics, with how to be a good monk or a good lay person, And then stage by stage, taking this practice, this purifying first of morality, the purifying of the mind, until the final stage of enlightenment itself, to the eradicating of the asavas, the end of all suffering. And in this particular sutta, at this particular stage, they say the monk, I just wrote it down so I'd get the Pali correct. What the monk knows is that there is this is low, this is high, and that there is a higher release, a further release from this perception. And the way this was explained, this is one of those interesting little phrases. In Pali, it's so pajanati, ati imang, ati hinang, ati panitang, ati imasa sanya gatasa, uturing nisavanang. This is what he knows at this particular time. And as with many of these little phrases, it's very easy to misunderstand it or pass it by. And the commentarial explanation is, I found, quite inspiring. When he says that he knows there is this, what does he know there is? Is dukkha. That's what there is in this world. That's why that last week I had to read a free book from the Mahayana Buddhist Society in Perth in order to see whether it was suitable for giving out to people. It ended up in the fire room. And one of the reasons it got burnt was that he was teaching that the idea of emptiness, the idea there's nothing at all, that everything is insubstantial, nothing at all here. And this is not the teaching of the Buddha. What the Buddha taught, that there is something. What there is dukkha. Or, as I think it was Sister Wajira said in the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, what there is dukkha arising and dukkha passing away. That's all there is. Not emptiness, not something substantial and permanent and solid, but a middle path between emptiness and between solidity. And that middle path between is the understanding of dukkha. This there is. Not there is nothing, but there is something. That's something, dukkha arising and dukkha passing away. That's the understanding of the first noble truth. To see that which exists, that which is a process. A changing process, not solid but not empty either. Ati idang, ati hinang. Hina is the Pali word for low, inferior. Unfortunately, the Mahayana attributed that term to the Theravada, which was very unfair, inaccurate and improper. And here in this quote here, ati hinang, there is the low. Again, referring to the cause of dukkha, that which is low, craving, tanha, craving for sensory pleasures is low. Those who crave for sensory pleasures, who enjoy the five, that which we can find pleasure in from the five senses, is certainly one who is following the hina yana, the low path. Anyone who has bhavadanha or vibhavadanha is also following a low path. This is ati hinang. There is the low. There's also ati panitang. There is the high, the refined, Nibbana, the release from all this. And to express the fourth noble truth, the Buddha said, Ati imasa sanyagatasa uttarang nisaranang. There is this freeing, this way of freedom beyond these perceptions. So this is showing like the way, an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And again, understanding the Four Noble Truths is another way of understanding the three characteristics. The Four Noble Truths is the deeper understanding of the truth of dukkha, of unsatisfactoriness, of suffering. To see that what actually is, every moment of consciousness, or if one looks at it in terms of every mental activity, or every perception, or every feeling, or every form, is just a different manifestation of dukkha arising and dukkha passing away. That there is, that you can know. And to see that fully with wisdom, with a clear mind, gives you the insight into dukkha. To get the insight into anatta is perhaps the hardest, but at this particular stage in the practice, it is the most important. Sometimes that one can gain that insight into anatta through the understanding of dukkha. To see when this all there is this process, this burden, oppressive process of existence, of being a sensory being, of having five khandhas, but of not being in control of these things. Otherwise, one would be able to tell them what to do. One would be able to eliminate that which one found unpleasant and maintain that which one liked and found delight in. One cannot do that. Everything which one finds delighting, one cannot maintain it. It passes through one's fingers like water through the gaps between one's fingers. One cannot hold it or grasp it. As soon as one takes hold of it, it's gone. That doesn't sound like there's someone in control there, does it? It just sounds, it feels like a natural process of the universe, a natural law which doesn't follow anyone's command. If one can see that this process of existence, this what we call dukkha, what is dukkha, the empty process, is just that. It does bring along with it, hand in hand, the experience, the understanding, the penetration of anatta, of non-self. If I can only see that everything is dukkha, a process arising and passing away, then there is no place to put that label of a self, a soul, a being. That self, soul, or being just disappears and fades away. It is the understanding and penetration, especially of non-self, which gives rise to the first path and fruit. One may gain this path and fruit through first of all penetrating anicca, and then gaining the understanding of anatta, or through penetrating dukkha, and then gaining the understanding of anatta, as I've just explained, or by just going straight to anatta itself, to non-self, and penetrating it directly. Whichever way one goes, it's the understanding of anatta which gives rise to the first path and fruit. And this is the insight which has value. This has the insight which one should really be aspiring towards. This is the insight which makes one safe to a certain extent, secure. One is at last on firm ground on the path. The lower realms are closed off to you, and Nibbana has to be attained sooner or later. The process has started for the being to leave samsara. This is the turning point in a Buddhist's career. As one monk pointed out to me the other year, there's a sutta in which the Buddha picked up on his fingernail a little dust from the ground, a little loose earth, and asked the monks, which is more, the earth on my fingernail or the earth left in that which we call the great planet Earth? And the monks obediently said, even though it was very obvious, that the earth in the great earth contains much more soil than that which is on your fingertip. And the Buddha said, in just the same way, the amount of time left in samsara for one who has attained the first path and fruit to samsara, compared to the time they spent in samsara, is comparable, is like the soil on my fingertip compared to the soil in the rest of the earth. If one thinks about this, what a marvellous thing it would be to obtain this first path and fruit, to be able to gain this insight into anatta, which means that most of your work, most of the dukkha is gone. The amount of dukkha you've been through, like the whole planet Earth, the amount of dukkha left just on the fingertip. That's why the Buddha said that better than power over all the earth, not just wealth, but power over the whole earth, is the achievement of the first path and fruit. So that should be one's goal, that should be one's aim. And the attainment of jhana is a means towards that end. And one gains it by understanding the truth of anatta. If one has not attained that path and fruit yet, it means that one has not understood anatta. It means that one still has sakkaya ditthi, this self-view, which the Buddha defined as taking a view of a self in reference to the five khandhas, either taking the whole five khandhas of the self, or one of them, or part of them. In particular, the Buddha said he either takes one of the five khandhas as a self, as identical with the self, such as the self is the same as the body, or the self is the same as feeling, or the self is the same as perception, or the self is the same as one of the mental factors, such as mindfulness, or will, or the self is the same as consciousness, knowing, experiencing, perceiving. And one can see that this is a place where many people hang the label of self. I was just looking for this quote just before coming in here, and noticed that another piece where Bhikkhu Bodhi was describing that which we call a self is a very elusive thing, never manifesting itself clearly, but always so-called throwing hints of its existence. And the only way that its existence can be known is through inference, so we think. We infer a self because it never manifests clearly, which is suspiciously like there could be no self there at all, which of course is the truth. But we infer the self. We infer the self because of this tendency of delusion, of ignorance, to want to believe there's a self. And it's with regard to one of the 5 khandhas that we infer a self. And again, the first possibility is that the self is identical with one of the 5 khandhas or part of the 5 khandhas. And the self is the same as the body. Sometimes even monks would think that certainly I've gone past that delusion, that the self and the body are something completely different. But then sometimes these delusive attachments are buried so deeply that often they don't show themselves. They're latent tendencies inside of us. And only with regard to the body, when the body gets threatened, can we see whether we really take the body to be a self or not. Only when it's hurting, only when it's sick, only when it's dying, do we really see the attachment which comes as a result of that self-view. The body is mine, or the body is me. If you start getting weak, you start getting old. If you take pride in your body, being strong, that's all self-view again. And if you get concerned when a pain comes up in your body, and you think this might be cancer, this might be AIDS, this might be a terrible disease, that's very indicative that you're taking that part of your body or all of your body to be you, to be a self. If you can really let go of the body, so you look after it just like you look after your cup or your bowl, no more, no less. And if it does get stolen, if it does get broken, I've tried my best. It's not through heedlessness that this has happened. One can let it go and not worry about it at all. It's only when things get threatened that we find out about our attachments and our views. So be careful even at this level, identifying the self with the body. Don't think that you've got beyond that just because you've rationalized and inferred. See what happens whenever you get ill and get sick. When someone criticizes you for being short, for being stubby, for being fat, for being whatever, for being ugly. It's very few people, I think, identify themselves with what really is Vedana, with the feelings, even with perceptions. But the main area where people can identify a self with will be in sankhara, with mental formations, with the thoughts, with the ideas which one has. And again, when those thoughts and ideas get threatened, and how does a thought and idea get threatened? When someone says you're wrong, you've misunderstood that, you haven't got it right, your idea is wrong. There we can find whether we identify with being that idea. It's not to say that one should have no ideas. The ideas, the views, even right view is a raft to be used. But one can understand whether there is a labelling of a self there when it gets challenged. And if one gets upset, if one gets agitated, if one feels that one has to defend one's view against others, rather than just presenting it and just leaving it to them whether they accept it or not, there one can see a self owning a view, possessing it. This is my view, therefore it must be right. So be careful with the thoughts and ideas which one has, because again, the sense of self can come in there as well. And one may not notice it. And you know that before in my talks on non-self, that I've stressed that one of the deepest places where one hangs the label of self. In fact, I would say it is the deepest place, is on will, choice, or in other words, control. That which controls will. And this is a place where, again I say, it's the last place, the last hangout of the ego, of the self. It's its last fortress. Will. Why do you choose to do something? Why do you will? Why do you control? Where is this coming from? Things, when the Buddha said things have like three possible reasons why they come into existence, so most people infer. Either there's a cause, it's causality happening, or it's just pure chance. It just happens by itself. Or the third possibility is there's a controller there. Isara. I must admit I'm quoting here out of context, because here the Buddha was talking about the results of sukha or dukkha vedana, saying it's either, people say it's either karma as a cause, or it's just pure chance, or it's created by some sort of controlling God, a creator, an Isara. But one can use that three categories for all experience, asking why it came into existence. Has it a cause, or is it by chance, or is it done by a creator? In a sense, the creator is a cause, but this is like a being causing, rather than just natural causality. For much of us, I'm sure that the Putuchanas do not really conceive or infer that the will happens by chance. Most of the Putuchanas, actually all of the Putuchanas, would say that will happens because of an Isara, a controller, a master, an overlord. And that overlord is what they identify with the self, with me, with I. And it takes a lot of courage to uncover that delusion. It takes a lot of power from the mind and penetration to see that even the will is anatta, arises because of a cause. It's interesting to see some of the results when you start to talk like this, because people say, well, if will is cause, then I don't need to do anything. I don't need to put forth efforts. Again, that's just trying to control again, trying to interfere. You will put forth effort as a natural cause. It's not up to you, because there's no you there. But we see everything from this self-view. I'm going to put forth effort, well, I'm not going to put forth effort, because it's not worth it. You've got no say in the matter. You don't choose. Effort arises from other causes, not because of a self inside calling the shots. Striving happens through other causes, not because it's ordained by a God, or by a self, or by chance. This is the working of causality. What is the cause for that effort, that movement of the will, which gives rise eventually to Maggunpala? It is the words of the Aryas. That is the cause. But one has to uncover this for oneself. And one of the reasons why one doesn't want to uncover this is because this is where one vests. One has so much investments here in having the self, in having an ego. Again, because this is the last bastion of the ego will just resist and wriggle as much as it can to show that it is willing. It is the one who chooses. It is the one who does. I think, therefore I am. It means I chose to think, therefore I am. No, that's not what happens. You chose to think because of causes. Other causes outside of yourself and inside of yourself. Self here being just the assumed self, just the five khandhas. This is where the choice arose. Just simple causality. So see if one takes the will to be oneself, the one who gives all the orders. To do this, again, one does need a very powerful mind, a very calm mind. It's as if you're catching delusion out when it hasn't got the five hindrances around to protect it and to chase the mind on other directions. Here you can really catch ignorance, delusion out and see the truth that even will is not self. And the other place where one puts the label of a self is on consciousness itself, on experience. I am the knowing. I am the experiencer. I am the one who feels, the one who hears, the one who experiences this world. Fortunately, this is an easier one to uncover and to see the illusory nature of. Especially when one is very careful and understands this body and mind in terms of the five aggregates, where the Buddha very brilliantly set aside consciousness apart from the other four aggregates. Set aside consciousness and show that consciousness is just a manifestation of the six senses. It is just an activity of sense impingement, of sense consciousness. It is something which arises and passes away. That consciousness arises and passes away is very easy for a person to see if you really want to. If you're pointed in that direction, if you're taught. And if one can see that consciousness is that which arises and passes away, then how on earth can one take consciousness, experiencing, to be a self? In this way, by seeing where one holds on to the idea of a self, by going through the five khandhas one by one, one should be able to discard the notion that any one of the five khandhas is identical with the self, or that any one of the five khandhas, or any part of the five khandhas, is identical with the self. But then the way the mind works is that they might say, well, there's other ways that a self can exist. I've already mentioning here the self being identical with one of the five khandhas. I've also included in this analysis that the self is part of one of the five khandhas. The other alternative is that the five khandhas are part of a self. The self is something larger and greater which contains the five khandhas. But if one looks, if one contemplates, if one has this clear penetrative state of mind, one can see that the five khandhas comprise the whole of existence, the whole of the universe, the whole of samsara, and one cannot posit anything outside of those five khandhas. If one tries to think of something outside of the five khandhas, it's just a thought, part of the sankharas. If If one tries to assume something, experience something outside the five khandhas, it's an experience. It's maybe a sanya or vedana. It's not that hard to realize there is nothing outside of five khandhas. That's all there is. It's such a beautifully constructed category, framework of all existence that nothing can fall outside of that. So the idea that the self can be something greater and bigger contained in the five khandhas, or the fourth possibility that the self can possess the five khandhas, can be eliminated. It's just impossible. And by using this sort of method, when the mind is calm, when the five hindrances have been overcome, especially when the mind has emerged from a jhana, by using this method, this yonisamanasikara, of trying to find out what one assumes to be a self, what one takes as a self, what one thinks to be a self, going through each of the khandhas in turn, parts of them in turn, asking oneself, inquiring, what do I take as a self? What do I take as me? What do I take as mine? Then if that yonisamanasikara, that work of the mind which goes back to the root of things, the source of things, is accompanied by power gained through the suppression of the five hindrances, then insight will arise. This insight, the Buddha called dasana, seeing clearly. Just the same as one sees with the eyes, seeing with the mind. Those asawas which are to be overcome through dasana, through seeing clearly, are just those, Sila-bata paramasa, Sakaya Ditti and Vicikicca, the first three fetters, which block one from being a stream enterer. These are the fetters which are overcome through seeing clearly. If you remember, 2 weeks ago I gave a discourse in which I spent a lot of the discourse talking about the Sabbasava Sutta, the second sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, the different ways of overcoming asavas. And the first way of overcoming asavas, these using the root meaning of asavas, there's outflowings of the mind, going out to things. In this particular context, these asavas which are to be overcome through seeing clearly are just those three fetters, those three sanyojanas. There are other defilements, other asavas, other outflowings, other fetters to be overcome in other ways, such as through driving out, through vinodana, or through cultivating bhavana. But these fetters, the first ones one should throw out, the first ones one should eradicate, are done so through seeing clearly. And that's why the insight is so necessary at this particular stage. The insight which is empowered by jhanas. Then, if one can gain that insight into selflessness, then one will never take anything to be a me or a mine. In particular, one will stop trying to control everything. Again, this will again. This will's function is to control. It is the delusion of an ego which gives rise to the will to control, to the will to manipulate one's surroundings, inner and outer, to give security, to give pleasure, to give a sense of worth. All of these things which create craving, which create desire, which create aversion, which create dukkha in the world. We're trying to control things. And you see this happening time and time again in one's mind, whether it's the chanting, trying to control it, whether it's the talk, trying to control it, whether it's the food one eats, trying to control what one gets in the morning, whether it's the temperature, whether it's the routine in the monastery. This is all the work of the delusion of self. That which wants to control, exert power through the will, is the delusion of self. And so if one can overcome that, the delusion of self, that which we call raga, this sensory craving, and the craving for the delight in the mind as well, this desire, this lusting after, and this anger will disappear, will fade away, will have to fade away, because that which has given it a being, which has given it life, the delusion of self, which wants to control, which wants to have happiness and push away pain and get rid of obstacles to one's happiness. This is what anger is. It wants to get rid of that which is an obstacle to that which it thinks is happiness. Get rid of this, monk, because you spoil my day by doing this. I could have meditated this evening instead of listening to a talk. I could have maybe even got enlightened this evening. I could have... Whatever one thinks is an obstacle, a hindrance to that which one is looking for as a place of delight, one will feel anger towards. So one can imagine when one stops this obsession to control based on a view of self, it becomes a great sense of peace in the mind. A peace because the controlling, the manipulating has ceased. This is a way that one attains anagami. This is a way that one attains the deep jhanas with ease, at will. Somebody mentioned the other day that Ajahn Ganho is going to come here next year. Someone asked him, how does he meditate? He says, it's really easy, just does nothing. If one could truly do nothing, it would be very easy to get into a jhana. As I've said here before, a quote, I forget who it was, many years ago, couple of decades ago probably, once said the reason why you don't get quiet in your meditation is because you're still attached to the world. There's still some attachment in there. One is still attached to thought, to planning, to wanting, to not wanting. In short, to controlling. From ego, from the sense of a self, which wants to exert power, exert control. If one can only let that go, realize that this is not mine, this is not me. What is not mine, we don't try and control. It's someone else's problem. I don't try and control my mother's kitchen. Don't tell her where to keep her pots and pans, what she should cook. It's not mine, it's not my business. No more do I try and control what's not my business, what's not mine. Does one's duty according to the Vinaya, and that's all. As a monk. So if we can give up controlling, we can let go of the problem. As the Buddha once said, when he was passing through a forest, seeing the leaves and the twigs in the forest, and pointing them out to the monks, saying, monks, what would happen if someone took these leaves and twigs, put them on a fire, burnt them all up to ashes, threw the ashes into the air on a windy day, and had them scattered in all directions? Would you be worried? Would you be upset? Would there be a problem to you? The monk said, no, of course not. Why not, monks? Because these leaves and twigs do not belong to us. In much the same way, If someone took hold of your body, put it on a fire, burnt it to ashes, threw the ashes up into the wind and let the wind go in all different directions, would you be afraid of that, worried about that, upset about that? Would you be upset about that? You would do if you thought the body was mine. Or if the mental factors, if you got senile, if through some disease you lost your ability to talk, to think, if the other four khandhas were as if thrown on a fire, burnt to ashes and thrown to the wind in all directions, would that concern you? Only if you took those four mental khandhas to be a self, to be mine. So, in order to gain that first path and fruit, one has to use such techniques, such thoughts, such directions, as I pointed out this evening, to point the mind in the right direction and to keep that investigation going deeper and deeper and deeper. What do I take as a self? What do I take as me? What do I take as mine? In terms especially of the five khandhas, or in terms of the six senses, or in terms of body, kaya, vedana, feeling, chitta, mind, or mind objects, the four satipatthānas. Use them in this way to uncover the delusion of a self. And when that delusion is overcome, most of the problem has disappeared. You've got rid of the whole earth off your back. All you've got left is the weight of a small bit of soil on your fingertip. And may each one of you attain to that path and fruit as soon as possible. Has anyone got any questions or comments on this evening's discourse?